All right, just a quick recap for everyone. IntegrityNext does offer an entire solution suite, right? So this is consisting of different modules you can freely combine. But today, as the topic suggests, we will focus just on the Carbon Emissions Navigator. When we start a project, we need an indication from your side which companies you want to monitor. So you would typically click on the Add Companies button. You would select, do you want to start with maybe just CCF information or already include PCF assessments? And then we make it very easy for you to get started. You have an Excel template you can download. We just need the company name, address data, an email address per company, and that's all what we need to send out the assessments and fill in the information. Suppliers then receive the invites. They can fill out the data points and the Carbon Emissions Navigator will populate. We already heard from the two presentations that decarbonization is quite complex. It's a strategic decision. It takes a long time. So it was key for us and our customers to give them KPIs right away. So on the top section, you can see that we give you an indication of how many companies you're monitoring, to which assessments you invited them. So for example, you can directly see which companies have corporate carbon data, who is committed to reduction targets, and who can also already provide PCF data. On the right-hand side, the most important thing one might argue is that you can also see the total scope 1 and 2 reductions and also the scope 3 performance compared to the last year. And this is obviously one of the most important things, right, when it comes to decarbonization. So you need to allocate where your main drivers of carbon emitters come from. When we want to deep dive now on those scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, this is the next dashboard here. So we can give you an indication over the last 3 years of how those emissions actually evolved so that you can easily identify trends. And on the right-hand side, we underscore that with the total emissions displayed and then also broken down by scope 1, 2, and 3. And as we already heard, this is a picture we typically see in our project is that scope 3 is the highest, right? So usually scope 3 columns are the highest. And now the challenge is, or the goal is that we bring this column as much down as possible. So that leads us to the reduction targets section. And this is key to understand who of my suppliers do already commit to, let's say, SBTi targets, who follow other regimes, and what have we already accomplished, right, in reduction targets. And that is, again, supported by the graph on the right-hand side. We display in green the target you set yourself and can also display the future development until you reach net zero. And then you can see in the blue line the actual emissions we calculated or we got from your supply chain. And unfortunately, in this case, the actual emissions, so the blue line is above the green line. That means you need to take action, right? So we are not on track right now. The trend is correct, so the line goes down, but we are not quite there where we should be. To get now a full picture, we can also include PCF data. I will keep it short here because next session's webinar will mainly focus on the PCF data, but just maybe a quick recap here. We can collect PCF data and also support your suppliers with the calculation, and we can display here your high emitters within your products. We can break down those total emissions by life cycle stage and also by raw materials. And lastly, all of this flows now together into one big picture in the carbon emissions table. And here we have really per line one company. We can see the business relationship. We can see already the CCF assessment result, their emissions data, as well as the spend attribution to ourselves and whether they have a target in place or not. Lastly, again, you can also see PCF information. Now, important is, for example, that I see here, I have a direct supplier, the total emissions are quite high and the spend attribution is high as well, and they do not have a target yet. So this is a typical case where you could create an action actually engage with the supplier. So you can directly move to our create action template, and we don't make it hard for you. You can just easily scroll for our action library, click on corporate carbon footprint. You could create an internal action or a data collection action, but again, we want to focus on a target setting action. And now it depends a little bit on the maturity of your supplier, right? Are they quite immature maybe in the decarbonization journey? Then you just maybe want to start easy with giving them guidance on reducing scope 1. Or are they maybe already a bit more mature? So you maybe want to create an action on supporting them with actually SBTi targets. When I click on the action, I can see that the action title and the description are automatically filled out. I just need to set a status, can set a due date, so until when I expect a response from my supplier. And by clicking save, I send out an email with this description directly to my supplier, and they can react within their IntegrityNext interface. And that actually brings us to the supplier profile. That's the last thing what I want to show you today. This is the existing company profile of your suppliers, so they know this interface. They can see their already existing ESG assessments they received, and now when they scroll down, they will see a new assessment appearing named Corporate Carbon Footprint. And here it was very strategic for us to make it as easy as possible, because it's not just a usual assessment where they have to click yes or no. It's more like filling out data points. So we structured it into 5 very easy and digestible steps. First step, very easy. Do you already measure your corporate carbon footprint? In case they would indicate no, we at least ask if they are planning to do so and by when. And if they really need like in-depth support, they can already see with whom we are partnering here. For our purpose today, we obviously would indicate a yes, and then the suppliers would move on to the greenhouse gas emissions table. They can indicate which methodology they are following, whether they can support their statements via a report or via a third-party verification, and then they can actually fill out the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions for the last 3 years. We already heard that especially scope 3 is quite important to get as much transparency as possible, so they can add as much categories here as they want and fill in more information so that we can digest it in the Carbon Emissions Navigator. Last thing what they need to do is indicate their annual turnover, and then we will automatically calculate the GHG emissions per turnover, which is obviously very important for the spend attribution. Next step is the emission reduction targets. So here we are asking them, again, which methodology are you following? SBTi is usually quite common. Do you follow an absolute reduction or an intensity reduction? And can you prove that? Did you validate it by SBTi, for example? And you can also obviously upload your SBTi validation letter if you have one. Next step would be the net zero commitment. So first question, have you already achieved net zero? Usually most companies would indicate a no. And then we are asking if you at least have a goal to reach net zero and by when you are planning to do so. And the last thing now is to wrap it up with the actual achievements, right? Because we not only want to understand if you are great at setting targets, but also at achieving them. So we ask suppliers to give us an indication of what they achieved actually from their targets they promised. And again, they can support this with any sort of additional information like power purchase agreements or GHG emission calculation reports. And that wraps it up from my side.